every eruption is exciting, but I've never seen fountains as high as the ones that occurred during the first episodes of Pu'u'o.
The first few years I worked here, we were in the part of the eruption where Pu'u'o was erupting episodically. So we'd have these fantastic high lava fountains every 3 or 4 weeks. And the eruption would last, each eruptive episode would last for less than a day usually. So it was really different than, ever since about 1986, eruption's been pretty much continuous. But in those early days, the eruption actually, even though it was erupting less frequently, the eruption controlled your life a lot more, because you could never, after the summit had inflated to a certain point and you knew that the next eruptive episode was due, you were on call 24 hours, because the activity was so brief that as soon as the episode started, we'd rush out to our camp and we'd stay there till it was over. So I remember, like, on weekends not being able to leave the house without a radio. I was afraid to start baking bread or do anything that could last more than an hour, because I might have to leave any second to go out to the eruption. And as far as the activity, those high fountains were so spectacular, and they're what everybody remembers and everybody wishes would happen again. But they were actually a lot harder to work around. It was a lot harder to study the eruption in those days, because once a high fountaining began, you couldn't get anywhere near the vent, and all the flows were flows. Very hard to walk around the perimeter of a new flow, because it was on top of older and it just miles of and so it was a lot harder to kind of get in close and study things. And since the eruption has been continuous with tube-fed Hoi flows, I think we've actually learned a lot more.
The most interesting and exciting thing probably was the high fountaining episodes of Pu'u'o. From this very spot, we could see the fountains, we could hear it. It was like a 747 taking off. It was quite dramatic.
When we had the big fountain eruptions, like in 84, 85, and early 86, one of the concerns was, flying too close to the lava fountains itself, because if I recall right, if you get maybe 300-400 meters away from the fountain itself, the radiant heat was actually sufficient enough that you could feel it in the cockpit. If you got any closer, we were worried that it might melt the windows or, blister the aircraft. For me, the first time I got to shut down a helicopter, because obviously when the helicopter's running, it's making a lot of noise, but when I got to shut it down at the eruption site, to hear the fire fountains erupt was like a large jet engine just going at full throttle. And that's the amount of gas and molten material just getting jetted out of the earth. It's just such extreme volumes. And so, when you first hear and see it from the ground, and I was landed maybe about 400 or 500 meters away from the cone itself, and so that's pretty close proximity to it, and to see it and to hear it was just it was a mind-boggling experience.
While I was at the observatory, I got to do a lot of studying of lava lakes, because Kūpainaha Lava Lake was full at the time when I first arrived, and we got to see overflows from the lava lake and watch spatter ramparts build up, and get to see crust. You could almost look eye level out over the lava lake and see the crust actually just right at your eye level building and stuff, and you'd be right behind a little dam, and you'd be standing there and you'd wonder, I wonder how strong this lava dam is that's holding back all this lava. And we learned not too long after that, in my first summer, that they weren't very strong at all, and they would just break, the levees would break open and the lava would come rushing out in these huge torrents and go cascading over the side of the little shield. And so we started backing off just a little bit from that. One of the things that I was responsible for while I worked at the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory was to sample lava from the vent once a week or so, and we were keeping a time series, or a series of measurements on the composition of the lava and also the temperature of the lava, which we could tell from the frozen samples.
The geologists would take lava samples, and one of the ways that they do it is they take a long cable with some type of a weight on the end of it, and they toss it either into a river, a lava pond, or a lava tube, and lava would basically chill around the weight, and they'd extract it.
Well, as time went on, particularly in early 1990, eventually what happened was that the lava lake went further and further down, and it also solidified in, so there wasn't any lava next to the edge where you could throw down and fish it out. It was in a central hole inside the crater. So it was difficult to get out. And I was getting desperate for a sample, and so I talked to David Okita, our helicopter pilot.
Good old Ken decided to take a sample out of a lava lake, but it was out of the reach of where you could toss it from the nearest rim. So we hooked up a long 300-foot cable underneath my ship, and I had to hover it over a little opening in the lava lake and basically dip like a 25-pound slab of steel inside there.
And David carefully took off with that thing and lifted the whole thing up in the air. And he was like, the biggest problem is it was kind of cloudy out at the lava lake. So he was practically up in the clouds, and he's trying to fish in what looked like a little teeny hole way down at the bottom. It was kind of like ice fishing or something. He was actually able to dip that thing into the lava lake and pull it back out, and he brought it right over to me on the rim of the caldera and basically set it down at my feet. And then he landed by laying out all the cable again. So that was pretty incredible.
Now, whether it's worth it, I don't know. We're going to have to ask him.
I guess that struck me about Wahula, that it was kind of abandoned or kind of given up, that we're moving on from there. And we saw that right from the beginning when the lava entered the visitor center area. It was kind of a resignation. We started moving stuff out of there, but at some point everybody just kind of stopped, and lava came. There's tools and equipment still in the shop. There was a lot of things that could have been salvaged, but people kind of backed off. And I don't know, it's a psychology, I think, of something so profound as molten lava coming and just inundating and taking something out, that I don't think we're equipped really to know how to deal quite with that. And I don't think people have been for a long time. You hear stories going way back to where lava's taken out different villages and so forth, and people kind of at some point back away. And it was our first chance, so we really had a chance to play with diversion of lava. And the Hawaii County Fire are always kind of curious, what can you do? But the question always came is, you divert the lava from going into Joe's home, and it goes over and takes out Sam's home. Now, what kind of liability do you have? So the county has always been a little reluctant to try any lava diversion. And so it was kind of like, do everything you can. We want to see, So we tried everything. And what we found we could do, we actually could keep a steam blanket underneath the visitor center. Lava actually flowed almost all the way out and out the other side, under the pilings. And as long as we kept water on the lava, the steam blanket was between the lava and the floor of the visitor center. And then all of a sudden, our schedule of tanker trucks got confused, and we ran out of water. And it took 5 minutes from the time we stopped the steam blanket to the time the whole thing just exploded and went up. So it was kind of a mixed experience there. But I guess that didn't bother me as much as the temple, the park community, the housing, and things like that. That was kind of a change of times, how we managed the park, how we viewed the whole coastal area. It was kind of like a piece of my life was just kind of, that was the final blow when Wahula went, that was gone. And so it took me a while to kind of, I guess, reconcile that this was part of a natural process and part of something that, just had to be accepted.
When we worked down in Kalapana in 1990, where about 100 homes were taken in 3 months' time, we were with the residents every day, and because they were allowed to remain in the area until the last minute, because the flows were moving very slowly and there was very little hazard to life or limb. It was just a matter of property loss. So civil defense allowed people to stay in their houses till the last minute, and so we would go into the area that only the residents and the geologists and civil defense were allowed into every day and track the progress of the flows. And tell civil defense, what we thought was going to happen next in terms of where the flows were going to go and how fast they were going to get there. And we would be talking to the residents constantly. And then it was a very sort of sad experience because many of these people were, it was their place they didn't ever want to leave, and they were very, very unhappy. And the fact that the flows moved so slowly across the level ground made it much more painful because it was such a slow process, and people's houses would be, the lava would come right up to them, and then the eruption would pause for a week, and the flows would kind of take a different track when it started up again. And so people were really hopeful that their place was going to be spared, and they would ask us all the time, and we'd have to try and make sure that they had a realistic view, but at the same time not be totally negative. And so it was very hard. I mean, I think all of us kind of suffered emotionally from that who were down there every day.
It was really difficult to watch people's houses. You would see them burned down, people that you knew and people that you actually cared about. And I think all of us had the same experience, that it was an incredible sorrow. And the other thing that it made you do is you felt like, I have all this knowledge and I can't do anything. It makes you feel fairly helpless to sit and watch that kind of situation. To watch one house after another go up into flames, and streets that were there get covered by lava flows, and really little or nothing that you can do about it. The good thing is we were able to very accurately predict where the lava was going to go and to get people out of their houses, so that most everybody got the things that they wanted and were able to save their belongings. And even though they were able, they lost their houses, and most of them that wanted to were able to stand and watch, as their property went or go away, But it was, for all of us, it's still emotional for me, and it's 13 years later now.
Yeah, one of my most memorable occasions on Kilauea volcano was flying into the episode 51 vent. It was new; it was less than 24 hours old, and to get there, the timing was perfect. The wind direction was fine, and it was just one beautiful event after another. The highlight, I guess, would be the morning after, where the vent was starting to shut down a little bit, but when a big rainbow formed right behind the vent. And
it was really fantastic, because this had ripped out with just a small curtain of fire that had come out on the side of Pu'uo'o, and it had just essentially just ripped the ground open, and there was a bunch of small fountains, and they were coming up like dome fountains, and you could actually get above the line of the fountains, so you could be standing right over the tube. And the whole thing was just quivering. The ground was just quivering like this, and the tube was probably encased in maybe only in maybe 16 or 18 inches of surface material that you were standing over. It was extremely hot, but really fantastic, because there were so many things going on in such a very short space.
One of the most exciting events I remember was the big surge that happened, I think it was early February 1996. And it actually was pretty unexpected.
It was a rapid rise in the summit, and it appeared that it was going to erupt up here first. People could hear rocks cracking. There was a huge gas pulse that came on.
But just as we were cued to wait for something to happen in the summit, seismicity and tilt and everything shifted out to the eruption site out here. So many of us got transported out here, and what we found was that there was apparently so much lava, as in a big surge that came out of the ground. There was so much lava going through this tube system that it was gushing out of the first 2 or 3 skylights in the tube, and it was in these dome fountains. The first skylight, I remember, was very large. It was probably on the order of 15 meters, 20 meters in diameter. And that had turned into a dome fountain. We measured the height of the fountain. The overall dimension was about 8 meters high, which is was gushing out of there, forming a flow that was then going down slope at an average rate of about 1 kilometer per hour. It was pretty fast for Kīlauea flows. Around the upper skylight, I had a number of VLF monitoring lines to measure how much lava was going through the tube, and I figured, well, this is, if anything, this would be the most interesting measurement ever taken, to find out exactly how much lava was going through the tube. But of course, it was sort of scary because the line was only 5 meters away from this 15 to 20 meter diameter lava dome fountain. So I waited for a bit to see if there was so much lava going through the tube that it was going to rupture the roof at that point. But it didn't seem to, so I figured I had enough time to go in for 15 minutes and make this measurement. And somebody else, I guess, was foolish enough to believe that I knew what I was doing, so they went with me. And the two of us took, it was a record. I think we did the whole thing in 10 minutes instead of 15. But working that close to a dome fountain was actually, you could feel it rumbling under your feet. The roof of the tube we later found was about 3 meters thick. And the tube was obviously completely full because it was gushing out of that skylight. So that was a pretty exciting time.
I think probably the most excitement for me occurred in 1997 when there was a tremendous amount of vent activity happening. There were a number of spatter cones that had been formed and that were continuing to form, and almost every time I went there was a new feature to focus on and to explore. One of the events that stand out for me was a couple days I was up there when the lava lake actually filled up to the top, gushing out of a beautiful cone in the center of Pu'uo'o, and filled up and poured out of both sides, and it was really beautiful and dramatic. And I actually walked to the summit and photographed it looking down as it was pouring out of both sides. And
We could see the vent and the spattering and stuff, and the lava come gushing out and swirling around down there in the lava lake, and see the entire lava lake, and it was really cool. But we were way up high on the rim of the cone, and we were hundreds of feet above the lava lake at that point. But it was still just really hot. You would lean out over there to look, and you would just get hit like you were in a blast furnace looking at that. And then the sulfur would come in over there, and you couldn't breathe and you couldn't see. So it was kind of an interesting experience, wandering that close to the edge. But being able to look in the crater was just fantastic.
the heat was intense, but the visuals were just incredible.
I think that one of the strongest emotional impacts of filming the volcano is just seeing the massive power of nature.
One of the most enjoyable things is just interacting with creation as it's happening. The ongoing relationship with Kīlauea volcano, the many aspects of it, from the vent activity as it flows down the mountain. Recently I was lucky enough to be in some thick forest with a'au flows, and then 2 weeks later as it's flowing into the ocean. So just the whole scope of it, to be able to just be part of this creation.
I think the one that affected me the most would be the Pu'u rescue, when Paramount crashed into the Pu'u vent and the helicopter with 3 on board landed right next to the lava lake. And the difficulties, and one is rescuing the people, but also I think the reality of how people don't understand the nature of volcanoes and how evident it became, because there was so much pressure on us to, as I said during those days, they wanted me to throw another ranger in the pit. They had no concept of the power and the nature of the volcano.
So I think one of the most interesting things about being here so long and seeing the effects of this eruption is seeing the changes it's wrought on the landscape. And it's an odd thing. It's both unsettling and at the same time very exhilarating to see what has happened down at the coast in particular, where the flow field is about 15 kilometers wide now, and you can look out there and remember all these places, huge forests and villages that used to be there, and it's both sad to see that gone and also exciting to see such rapid change geologically and see all these new landforms that are forming, and realize that you are seeing how the islands formed, which is, again, a geologic process that normally no one gets to appreciate over the span of a human life.